Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, joined by Matt Hladek from thespun.com. Matt, I want to dig right into it. Finally, all the talking is over, all of the pontificating, all the bloviating. Now it's time for some football. Dear God, I'm so excited. And what better way to get jacked up for the NFL season, Raiders Broncos, which we're going to talk about in a second. What a week of football. And I bet we're the only ones in America talking about football in Colorado, and it's not Deion Sanders.
That's true. I mean, he has definitely stolen all the headlines out in Colorado, and most of them across college football in general.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. All right, Matt, I think this is a big one for the Raiders. Earlier in the year, when the schedule first came out, I talked about going up and stealing one. And I had several people call me to task saying, the Raiders have won the last 6 or 7, and that's where their words. We know how many it was, but why would you say it's a steal? I was told once, and I believe it, it resonated with me by Don Shula. Any road win in the NFL is a steal because even Vegas automatically gives the home team 3. And that in the National Football League now, imagine how different it is now than when Shula coached. There's so much parity that's always resonated with me. A road win to me is always a steal. What do you think of that?
Well, I'll go a step further and say I think a road divisional win, which obviously this is what it would be, is almost always a steal. Unless there's such a clear disparity in the teams that we're talking about, where you have a Super Bowl contender and a team that's looking like they're going to get the number one pick, then it would be almost their expected win. But even then, nothing's guaranteed. I think any type of road divisional win is great for your resume. And it always is a little bit of a steal, especially considering, how big this game is for the Broncos, too, because they had a disastrous season last year. There's a lot of pressure on them, on Sean Payton, on Russell Wilson, to show that that was a fluke and that they're on the right track, and they're going to be a playoff team finally in 2023. So I think the pressure's on Denver. No one's really expecting the Raiders to go in and win their week one. So I think it would qualify as a steal to get out of Denver with a win.
Now, I think the Raiders are going to win it. I didn't when the schedule came out. I do think the Raiders are going to win this. I still think 9 games if Jimmy stays healthy for all 17. I'm going to do a podcast later this week with my actual final predictions. But the thing that stands out to me about this is let's talk about Sean Payton. I think he's a really good coach. And I've said that. I don't think he's an elite. I don't think he is a Bill Parcells. I don't think he's an Andy Reid. I don't think he's a Bill Belichick. Those guys get I don't think Don Shula is an elite guy, even with all of his wins. Uh, well, I take that back. I kind of do feel that way about Don Shula. But anyways, my point is that this is a guy, Sean Payton, I think is a really good coach. I think the Denver Broncos did a really good job getting him. All of that. But I also know I think he's his biggest hype machine, just the way things work behind the scenes. And I don't, it's not like they went and got Andy Reid. Okay. I thought they would be better, but you're down 2 wide receivers in that system that Sean Payton runs, which is huge. Judy, to me, was going to maybe have an all pro season with the way Sean Payton's offense runs. So he's out. To me, that's not saying he's a bad coach. I'm just saying he's not elite. I think they got a lot of injuries. I think their defense is good. I think the coaching is going to be significantly better this year. Do I think Denver's a playoff team? No. Do I think Denver's as good as the Raiders? No. But I still think they're going to be better. And you saw with Sean Payton's comments over the offseason, he's trying to build himself a buffer for when this team isn't good. Again, I just think everything lines up for the Raiders. Where am I wrong?
I agree with you. I do think that obviously Sean Payton's a big upgrade over Nathaniel Hackett, first time head coach, who clearly didn't have what it took last year. To me, the biggest concern I have with Broncos is still Russell Wilson. I think he'll be coached better in 2023. But like you said, they do have some injuries on the perimeter receiver. The line, we don't know what kind of performance we'll be getting out of them. And I'm starting to buy into the fact that Russ might be, if not totally done, significantly diminished from what he was in Seattle. Because here's the thing with Russell Wilson. He has a cannon for an arm. He has had unbelievable athleticism, unbelievable playmaker. But he was never a guy who would just sit back and dissect you in the pocket. That's not me saying he couldn't win from the pocket or couldn't throw from the pocket.
But
But
it's
what
not
I'm
his
saying,
forte.
but it's not his forte. He's 5'11". He was an unbelievable athlete. He was great on the move, play action fakes, rollouts. If he could evade, if a play broke down, he could make a play of nothing. A tremendous quarterback when he was with Seattle in his prime. But because of the way his style depended on his playmaking and athleticism, and he's not the biggest dude back there, in the pocket when it comes to seeing over his line and throwing lanes and things like that. If he loses a little bit of that, it's a major hit. And that's where I'm going to be fascinated to see this year. Are they able to get significantly more out of him than they did last year? Because I do think Sean Payton's a much better coach than Daniel Hackett. But how much is left in the tank for Russell Wilson? Because that's going to be the difference between the Broncos being, a 6 or 7 win team, or maybe being around that 9 wins that you need to get in the wild card conversation.
I want to talk about Russell Wilson. I covered him back at Wisconsin, so I've known him a long time. Covered him. I wouldn't say known him, but covered him a long time. I like him personally. I think he's a great guy. I like him as a quarterback. But let's go back to Seattle. Before he had his injury in Seattle, he was already on the downward trend. Then he gets injured, downward trend, goes to Denver. A lot of it's Hackett's fault last year, but still, he wasn't Russell Wilson. Everybody, time, I heard this one time and I'll never forget it. Now, I think, well, I know who it was. It was Bubba Smith told me this, the great actor, the great football
Yeah.
player, Bubba Smith. He told me, he said, time, he said, I'm not going to tell you all of it because some of it is not fit. But he said, there are 2 things in this world that are undefeated. One of them is time. I won't tell you the other one on camera. But he goes, time is undefeated. And it's always clicking against everybody. Even Michael Jordan, who probably today would be, a great basketball player, isn't who he was. And I just think that's the deal with Russell Wilson. He's coming up against time now. And I believe that Sean Payton doesn't care about Russell Wilson and all that money and all that guaranteed money because, hey, I was brought in to fix all this. If I've got to eventually turn on Russell, I don't care. It buys me more time. So here's my question. When 2023 comes down to the final 3 weeks, will Russell Wilson be the starting quarterback of the Denver Broncos?
I think he will be. I think that there'll be at least, unless he suffers an injury, I don't think they'll have benched him at that point. But I will say this: I do think that you made an interesting point that they are kind of hamstrung with that contract they gave him. But if you're Sean Payton, I can see Sean Payton going to the Broncos at the end of the year if Russ doesn't have it anymore and it just really looks bad and said, hey, you brought me in, you gave me this money, this deal to turn this around. I can't do that with this guy. We have to figure something out. I don't know what they would have to figure out because, again, like I said, they're on the hook for a lot of money for him with the deal they gave him. But I think he'll still be the starter, with a couple of weeks left in the season, unless he gets hurt, because I think they'll be at least on the fringe of the playoff race at worst at that point, or if not better at that point, at worst, they'll be on the fringe of the playoff race, I should say. But I think it could get interesting after the season if they don't have a good year and he doesn't have a good year.
All right, Josh McDaniels' job is not in trouble. We're not trying to say it is because it isn't. And I laugh. People can say, "Well, Hondo's out there pimping for Josh." No, I'm just telling you the truth. It's his job's not up. He's not in trouble. But what are you looking for? I don't think the Raiders make the playoffs this year. And I don't think that, I mean, I think it disappoints everybody, but I don't think that's, yes, I think there's a chance they win 10 and get in. But I'm saying being realistic, I think this is a 9-win team and possibly 10. If they get to 10, I think they do get in the playoffs, but it's not a championship expectations on this team. What are you personally looking for? I'm in the battle every day. You're a national writer covering the National Football League in general, not just the Raiders. What are you looking for from Josh McDaniels in year 2?
To me, what I want to see is I think you want to see that development of building blocks. And this is something we've talked about a lot this offseason. They have some guys who are marquee frontline players at their positions around the league that we know about already. Guys like, Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, Daniel Carlson. Who's going to join that group? And not necessarily that group of being at one of the best at their position, if not the best at their position, but someone that you can build around, someone you can count on, someone that's a franchise type player. Colton Miller, I think, is someone that you could throw in that mix as well. But who else is going to be in there at the end of the year? Does Jimmy Garoppolo, does he stay healthy? Is he someone that they think they can count on for the next year or two throughout the rest of his deal? Are there some young players on the defense that showed signs of being good? Guys like, Devon Diablo, Trayvon Morig. Do they take that next step and become true building blocks? I think that's what you're looking for. You're looking for an improvement record. Yeah, you're looking to win more than 6 games. But, you could win 8 or 9 games and have a better season and still miss the playoffs because of how competitive the AFC is. So I don't think you're judging it just on getting into the postseason. But I do think you want to see more than 6 wins, but more importantly, you want to see the fact that the culture's there and they are developing guys and they're finding core guys they can build around for in 2024 and beyond.
There's a lot of talk, and it's not anger, but talk in Raider Nation. Start Aiden. I totally disagree. I don't think you start Aiden O'Connell. I don't think he's ready. I think he was the best of the rookie quarterbacks by far, but you want to put him in a position to win. I think you ride this Jimmy Garoppolo horse as long as you can. Let Aiden learn the system. Jimmy's a consummate professional. He's a good guy. He's good in the locker room. I think Aiden's learning a lot from him. I'm not on that road. I think you ride the Jimmy train as long as you can. Let Aiden develop. But if you're the Raiders, we wrote recently that they don't have a quarterback controversy. They have a quarterback luxury. They got Brian Hoyer, who's there that knows the system backwards and forwards, who's also a great teacher with Aiden. He understands his role. Jimmy's job is not to be Aiden's teacher. Now, he certainly does help him. I'm not saying he doesn't, but when you're a starting quarterback, you got a whole different mindset. And then they've got a kid that clearly has shown potential to be the quarterback of the future. I think they're at a quarterback luxury, not a controversy. How about you?
I would agree. I think that, the only way I would expect Aiden O'Connell to start this year is if, Jimmy Garoppolo has a season-ending injury and things start to get away from the Raiders and they want to look more towards the future. Or, maybe, I don't know, the last week of the regular season or week or two, if you're out of the playoff race, you give the kid a start to see what he has. The game doesn't matter for you standings-wise. I don't think – listen, if Jimmy Garoppolo has an up and down first 2 weeks, there's going to be people calling for him. Like you said, there's people calling for him now to be benched and have Aiden O'Connell start. I don't necessarily think that's the right thing to do. It's a tough situation to throw a kid in. He looked very good in the preseason, but it's still a different world when you get out there in the NFL regular season. And I expect as long as Jimmy Garoppolo is healthy and the Raiders are within the playoff race or within striking distance, I would think he's going to start because that's what they brought him in there to do.
Yep.
So I wouldn't say it's a quarterback controversy. I think that, like you said, they have a guy like Brian Hoyer who's been around the block and has been around that system that they can plug in if they have to, and they can continue to develop Aiden O'Connell, who really showed a lot of promise in the preseason and maybe end up being a draft steal.
I agree. All right, I want to go to a different subject. I thought Mark Davis did something last year that he didn't get enough credit for. When Josh and the team were clearly struggling, he made it clear, and we put the story out there. Josh's job wasn't in trouble. I know fans are going to be furious with what I'm about to say, but forget the Raiders. If you're an owner in the National Football League, I think you have to be so committed to the direction you're going that you have to tune out fans. It doesn't mean they don't matter without them buying tickets, without them turning on TV sets, without them buying jerseys. You don't have anything. But if you really believe in what you're doing, I think you have to stay singularly focused. And I think that's one of the advantages that Mark Davis has is with Al, you never knew what he was going to do. With Mark, you have an idea because Mark is smart enough to know what he doesn't know. I think the Raiders are in a good position because they love the fans, they respect the fans, but they are singularly focused on the direction they're headed. Do you agree or disagree with that comment?
I agree with the fact that you, like as an owner, you do have to have some type of conviction about the direction of your franchise or what you want your franchise to be. If you're just kind of going about it whims and firing GMs and firing head coaches, it's not going to work. There needs to be some type of continuity. There needs to be some type of, agreement between your front office and your head coach. Everyone's on the same page of that alignment. I don't think that, I obviously, like you said, I do think Mark Davis is in tune to what the fans are saying or understands, what fans have to say, but he's not going to just act on that off of one bad season if he believes in Josh McDaniels and believes in the vision that he and Dave Ziegler have for the franchise. I think that's important. I think you need to have that sort of belief and conviction in your guys. And listen, if it goes poorly this year, I don't think, like you said, I don't think Josh McDaniels' job's in jeopardy. It's not, but his seat will be hotter for 2024 because eventually you do have to produce results. But I think coming out and sort of reiterating what the direction of the franchise is, what they want to do, was a smart decision on Mark Davis's part last year. And now it's up to the front office and up to the coaching staff and up to the players to deliver.
Now I want to switch directions a little bit because I think the Raiders have had one of the best off seasons in all the National Football League. I thought they had a terrific draft. I thought they stayed consistent. You saw through mini camps, OTAs, the last mini camp, and through all of training camp, they just continued to get better. They didn't take steps back. Now, all training camp, all I heard from fans was, but it's only preseason. And I agree with them. But the only thing we could judge was what was in front of us. And I expect them to continue to improve. And I like the trajectory. Again, I've got people yelling at me for saying, I can't believe you're saying they're not a Super Bowl team. They're not. And I've got people saying, I can't believe you're predicting 9 wins. They're not even going to win 5. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. My job is to be the objective journalist and not be a fanboy. But I don't think at this point you can argue that the Raiders are not on a trajectory of improvement. Would you agree with that as an outsider as well?
On paper, yeah, I do think they are on the trajectory of improvement, or they look as if they're building something. We talked about Dave Ziegler's strategy this offseason where bringing in as much competition as possible, bringing in as many bodies as possible. They had, preseason doesn't necessarily mean anything, but they did have that kind of consistency in the preseason. It seemed like from their performances and from what you had reported throughout camp and throughout, their 3 exhibition games. On paper and what we've seen in the preseason, it does seem like they're on that upward trajectory. Now we get to test it. Now we get to see, when push comes to shove, what will things look like. Again, I've seen a lot of preseason predictions for the Raiders. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year. I also don't really get some of the ones I've seen where they're winning 3 or 4 games. I think they're definitely better than that. But now we'll get to see just how good they are, and just if that vision is coming to fruition.
I'm going to ask you about Josh McDaniels. Um, I know the impression of him and what it is because of the arrogance and the failure in Denver. But that's not the Josh McDaniels we're seeing every single day. I like him a lot. I think he's a very good coach. I think he's back to being like his father, which helps him because his dad is a football savant. I think before having been raised by one of the greatest high school football coaches of all time, and then going and coaching for Belichick, um, his ego was big, and whose wouldn't be when they're young? And then he gets it burst, has kind of gotten back to who he is. I think this is going to be a year where Josh McDaniels begins to change his perception that other people have of him. What do you think?
I'm not sure just yet because I'll tell you what, I think the biggest thing that will change that perception is winning big. We're winning.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if they're going to win enough this year to do that. And when I say win enough, I mean if they win 10, 11, if they won 10, 11 games and made the playoffs, then I think people would start to say, hey, maybe he has, kind of
Right.
changed, or maybe things are different from what the stereotype of him is. If they win, say, 8 games, even if they're better than last year, is that going to be enough to change a lot of minds? I'm not sure. So I don't know.
I agree. I don't think 8 changes minds,
Yeah.
but if my prediction of 9 wins is correct and Jimmy stays healthy for 17, that's where I'm asking you to do it.
In that case, I think I could see some people start to change their tune a little bit, because if that's the case, if they're not in the playoffs with 9 wins, they're right on the cusp, and they will have overachieved given what a lot of the preseason expectations were. So then you might see some people give him more credit, or start to say maybe he's a little bit different or changed from what we expected. I think the big change in his perception, outside perception, will come if and when they're in the playoffs again and looking like, hey, he built this up, into a true contender.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, man. I think that's a very fair analysis. All right, what's your score prediction for Saturday? I'm going to give mine later in the week. I want yours today. In fact, I'm going to write it down and put it in my article. What do you say?
I think it's going to be a tight game. I think that it will be, down to the wire, old fashioned AFC West type battle. And I think the Raiders win 24-21.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I think you and I may be awful close on score. I already know what I'm going to predict. Listen, I'm Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. He is the one and only, the great Matt Halatic at thespun.com. Listen, now that football season's here, just make thespun.com part of your favorites. We're also part of the Fans First Sports Network. Thanks for joining us, everybody. It's football week. Let the games begin in the words of Quagmire. Giggity, giggity, goo. Oh, yeah.